Welcome, everyone, to Voices of NCAJ, the podcast for the North Carolina Advocates for Justice. I am Amber Nimmix, your host and Director of External Affairs for NCAJ. Before we get started, I'd like to thank today's episode sponsor, Advocate Capital. Advocate is passionate about helping plaintiffs' attorneys get better results for clients, mainly through their AdvoTrack case expense funding service. It allows firms to track case expenses and recover borrowing costs, which makes the net cost of borrowing zero on cases they win. You can learn more at advocatecapital.com. My guest today is Lauren Newton, who could best be described as the quintessential NCAJ member. She has served on the Board of Governors as chair of the Auto Tort Section and the Women's Caucus. She's currently serving as our NCAJ Vice President for Legal Affairs, and she's been involved in presenting or chairing numerous of our CLEs. Lauren is always showing up for NCAJ, and here she is again now on the podcast. Lauren, welcome. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Amber. It feels like such an honor to come on after people like Phil Bedore and Sam McGee and some really excellent lawyers that I really admire and look up to.
Oh, well, great. Well, we're happy you're here. So we are in the middle of February, which is for us CLE season. And we thought that it would be a great time to have you come on because you have been involved in CLE planning for NCAJ for a while. And you are responsible for one of our most popular and successful CLEs of recent memory, which is our popular three-part Auto Tort series, the third part of which is coming up in February on the 14th. Talk to me about what makes a great CLE and what made this CLE series so different and so popular.
Well, I think all of our NCAJ CLEs are amazing. So let me just start there. I've been speaking at disbursements for, I don't know, maybe 8 years now or more. And that's always been one of my favorites because you always learn something new in every disbursement seminar that you attend. But what I think sets this trial series apart was just the fact that we had not had something like it for, I believe, like 8, 9 years maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time
Yeah.
we did it, it was a much smaller fact pattern. It involved a minor injury soft tissue case. And since then, we've had a global pandemic. We've converted to having e-courts. We have remote hearings now, WebEx hearings as default in places like Mecklenburg County. And so we've really pivoted to having a lot of CLEs virtual. And what really made this a great success is having a lot of trial lawyers in one space, able to talk to each other and see how a trial works in a motor vehicle case from start to finish. And the first day was chaired by two other folks. That was Courtney Mann and my friend Greg Whitley. But they did a really great job doing the pretrial stuff on day one. It was a 2-day series. And then day two, using the same fact pattern that folks learned. It was actually a real case that I tried and lost very unceremoniously in the mountains of North Carolina in 2023. But we actually watched that case be tried from start to finish, from jury selection in front of a former Superior Court judge all the way to verdict. And I think what was the coolest part of the case was watching an actual jury, folks that we brought in much like a focus group, deliberate. At least that was my favorite part.
Yeah, we really had so much great feedback from everybody who participated that it was the human interaction and the jurors and being able to really feed off of people's real time like reaction and response. It was very special. And the third part of this series is going to be coming up on the 14th of February. That's the depositions aspect, right?
Yeah, so the depositions portion is coming up, and sadly, I'm going to miss that because I will be at AAJ in
Oh,
Miami.
it's
But
nice.
then we hope to pick up with it. And of course, the deposition series is going to use the same fact pattern as well. I think that's going to be also a great success and kind of model that off of the AAJ Depositions College of really teaching these folks, this newer generation of lawyers who maybe started practicing during the pandemic when there was hardly any motor vehicle cases being tried. They were able to attend this series. They now know how to do jury selection. They feel comfortable doing it. They practiced it with an expert, Artemis Malakpour, and then they saw a trial from start to finish. So it gives them a comfort level going into a trial that I didn't have as a trial lawyer. For those of us who practice in South Carolina like I do, we actually have requirements where we have to watch trials and other things before you go and do it yourself as a trial lawyer. And so I feel like this is something that I drew inspiration from my South Carolina experience and thought we really owe this to our newer members of our auto tort section who are actually trying these cases and who really haven't seen a trial of a motor vehicle case at all since 2019. But I do think it'll be a great success with the depositions part. And then we hope to kind of cap it off with disbursements and tie everything in a little bit at the disbursement seminar later this month also.
Right. And that disbursement seminar is coming up the following Friday on the 21st of February. And you said a minute ago that you have presented that for 9 years?
I don't know, it might be 8 or 9. I know
Okay.
I recorded disbursements in 2018 early because when it was actually happening, I think I was giving birth, something like
Wow.
that.
Okay.
So I know for a fact it's been at least 7 years maybe. But yeah, I've been speaking on the topic of ERISA for a while now. But that's always a great seminar, especially for paralegals to attend, not just for lawyers.
Oh, really?
But for the paralegals, I know my paralegal gets something out of it every year because one of the things we as plaintiffs' attorneys have to contend with is liens when a case is over, and we should be contending with them while the case is going on. But nonetheless, there's no way to avoid them. So they're a necessary evil for all of our cases.
Right, right. That's the title of this year's seminar, right?
Yeah.
Liens and disbursements, necessary evil. What do you get out? I mean, having heard this story, I didn't realize that you recorded your presentation before going, before giving birth. I think that we might need to consider a special CLE award for dedication named in your honor. What do you get out of presenting on ERISA every year? I mean, you do a lot. People would forgive you if you step back from this.
I don't think I know how to say no, number
Well,
one.
we like that.
I also don't know how to sit still, quite frankly, which is why I'm clearly standing up right now at my standing desk as we're talking. But in all seriousness, I love it. And I considered it a huge honor the first time I was asked to speak. And I remember at the beginning feeling like a little bit of an imposter syndrome, like, oh, they actually want to hear from me. And it's because I piped up about something on the listserv. When I spoke about something and I started telling people, here's what I know about a topic in NCAJ. When you tell others that you know a little bit or a lot about a topic, you should be expected or you should expect to get a call from someone asking you to speak on said topic. And that's exactly what happened. Julie Bell, I think, asked me to speak 8 years ago or so, and I've been speaking on that same topic ever since.
Awesome. Awesome. You've also been involved in the Women's Caucus I know, for at least 7 years because we are coming up on the seventh annual Women's Caucus retreat. I don't remember because it predates my employment with NCAJ. How long has the Women's Caucus been around and how long have you been involved in it?
So we started talking about the Women's Caucus after I gave birth to my first child in 2014. I remember taking him to convention and trying to figure out, how do I pump during trial? How do I pump during a convention? How do I make this work? Who do I talk to about it? And I remember not feeling like there was a good resource to turn to as a female trial lawyer of childbearing age within the trial lawyers organization at a state level. And I went to our president at the time, Chris Nichols, and I said, hey, Chris, I have this idea. I'm really involved in AAJ, and they've been very supportive of me. At AAJ, we have a Women Trial Lawyers Caucus, and that organization was a huge resource for me. And I started talking to a woman from Mississippi named Vicki Slater, who I think even ended up running for governor of that state. And
Oh,
she's
wow.
an amazing trial lawyer. And she said, well, you just need to start a women's caucus in your state. And I said, well, will you help me? And she said, absolutely. And so AAJ gave me all the resources of what we needed to do to found the Women's Caucus. It was clear that we had support from our president of NCAJ at the time, in Chris Nichols, and he was incredibly supportive and behind me 100%. And we knew that there was some type of history of the makings of a women's caucus in years past. It was more informal and the women met as a group. I know folks like Peggy Abrams, Janet Ward Black, and some
Right.
other women would get together, but it was never formalized. It was never written into our bylaws. We weren't a formal caucus or a section, and we knew we wanted to do that. So the first step was seeing if there was interest. And once we started gauging interest, it was very clear that it's something that it wasn't just me that wanted it. It was a lot of other women, and that was not just working mothers who were practicing trial lawyers. It ran the gamut. It was lawyers just out of law school. It was women who didn't have
Right.
children. It was working mothers who were trying to navigate having children while being a trial lawyer. And it was also those who had been experienced and had already had their children and were in a later stage of their career. And we found that we had a lot in common, and we wanted not only just to network with one another, but to also be a resource to one another and to support women running for office and a wide array of things. So I think we had our first formal interest meeting at Mountain Magic maybe back in 2015, 2016, and we had great success after that. I was the president or the chair of Women's Caucus for 2 years for continuity, and I'm just thrilled with what it has become and the fact that we were able to get secure leave in this state codified by our Supreme Court justice a few years later was just it spoke to the necessity of this group and why us founding it when we did was necessary. And I think we've done a lot of good for working parents who are lawyers in the state.
Yeah, that happened. The announcement of secure leave, the formal, codification of that came, I think, within my first couple of weeks at NCAJ, and it was really exciting to come into the organization and be part of, of a historic event, but also of a news story that went international. There were like this was news that was being reported by like legal news organizations as far as like Guam and Australia and the Philippines, English speaking newspapers, because it was really a big step forward for for helping level the playing field for women in, who have to go to court, as a part of their job. It was amazing.
It really is. And it hit home with me personally. I remember sitting at a Board of Governors meeting, and someone came to speak to us from the Chief Justice's Committee on Professionalism. And I think this was, I don't know, maybe back in 2017, I think when Bill Powers was president. And it was when we had a different executive director, even. And I remember thinking they were so, they were telling us about all the benefits and what the Chief Justice's Committee on Professionalism does. And they said, well, we are responsible for implementing secured leave. And I said, well, can we have an honest conversation about that? It doesn't work for women or men who need to have time with their children after the birth or adoption of a child. And the woman said, well, what do you mean? Let's have a conversation about this. And I said, well, right now it's limited to 3 weeks and it was meant for vacation. And so what routinely happens is, let's say I go out and have a C-section. I'm going to be out for a minimum of 2 months, and that's a medical disability. And after the birth of my first child, I was told I needed to go to a deposition
Wow.
because my secure leave that the court approved was in excess of the 3 weeks allowed by the rule. And so what I had was lawyers who were challenging my secured leave. And then after the birth of my second child in 2018, it happened again, but with a brief. And it was really difficult to hear that, you are taking narcotic pain medications to recover from a major surgery, but yet you're expected to function at a level where it's just clearly not possible. And so we said, well, we don't think secure leave needs to go away. There should still be vacation. Lawyers should still be able to have the protection of the court to go on a vacation, but also they need a different rule that applies when, let's say, a child is born or a child is placed for adoption in the lawyer's home, male or female.
Right.
And so we had a task force. We went over the language with lots of people within the organization, and we really thought that it was probably going nowhere for a while. And then out of the blue, one day in the fall of 2019, we get a phone call saying, Chief Justice Beasley has just, signed this, and this is going to be the new rule. And we want everyone to come to Raleigh. And so I think we did. I think it might have been September 10th or 19th of 2019. And we all went to Raleigh for this really amazing press conference at the state bar. And I just remember thinking, wow, we did something really good, and now we're a model for the rest of the country. And I feel so proud when I go to AAJ and I can tell them this is the success that we had. Here's our model. Please take this and use it to try to implement this for the lawyers in your state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And being with that group when they get together for the Women's Caucus retreat, you can really feel the power and the energy. It's unique. It's really different. How has that event evolved since you've been doing it?
So I think when we first did it, we might have had 30, 40 women, including the speakers the first time. I could be wrong. I remember it being very small, and it was lovely. We had a mental health aspect. We always like to incorporate some kind of exercise in mental health. I think that year we did yoga. A friend of mine drove with me and, agreed to, I think for a couple $100, teach us yoga inside of a gym at a hotel that was really noisy, but we made the best of it. It was wonderful. I think one of our first speakers was actually one of the best trial lawyers in our state and within AAJ, Mona Lisa Wallace.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was lovely. We had Peggy Abrams also speak to us, I think, at that first Women's Caucus retreat, as well as Janet Ward Black. And so Janet Ward really came on as our first sponsor for the Women's Caucus. She was all in from day one. She didn't even hesitate when I picked up the phone and asked her. We started off not having a retreat, but we would have kind of these roundtable events. And Janet Ward offered her office, I think, for one of our first ones, and Camille Stell with Lawyers Mutual facilitated one of them. I think we did a confidence code book event one time. So it started off small, and we realized we were gaining traction. And we thought, and what we really wanted was to do our own CLE. And then that morphed into having the idea of the retreat. And it's gotten bigger and bigger every year. I know I was stuck due to a snowstorm last year and I couldn't make it. And I
Oh,
was
that's
so
right.
sad
That's right.
because so many of my best friends are in the Women's Caucus, which I think is a testament to that organization, that I would, instead of looking at my female colleagues as competitors, but rather my best friends who I text multiple times a day because of our connection through the Women's Caucus that we wouldn't have if it weren't through the caucus.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. You get that when you spend any time at that retreat. You really get the camaraderie and the support, not just the networking. It goes far beyond networking. And so yeah, it'll be in Cary this year. We're looking forward to having it there at the Maiden Hotel. That's March 13th and 14th.
And I think what makes it just more a little bit different from any of the other events that NCAJ hosts is we try to not focus to one specific practice area. We try to
Right.
focus on criminal law, employment, civil stuff, and we try to have it run the gamut. I know last year we had Julie Medlin come and speak on trauma-informed training and how to handle things from a trauma-informed approach. And that really transcends practice areas. You need that in workers' comp. You need that in auto torts. You need that in medical malpractice. You need that in criminal law and employment. So I think that's the one thing that does set the Women's Caucus retreat, sets it apart, is that it's a CLE that somehow works for all practice areas.
Yeah, yeah, and sort of on that in that same vein, this year, Ashley Campbell of the CEO, executive director of Legal Aid, she'll be talking about compassionate and competent client communication, which is something that stretches across all practice area needs. And then some stress management for lawyers is also on the bill. And this one, I really hope that I get to sit in for this one, the afternoon session on advocating for yourself in the workplace, which is going to be led by Jennifer Spiker, Helen Bedore, and Naya Fonville. So that one looks like it should be really good.
I'm very excited about that because Jennifer Spiker is my walking buddy at lunch. She's my law partner, and I am her biggest champion. Yeah, I've learned so much from Jennifer Spiker. In my opinion, she's one of the best employment lawyers in our state. That's one of the things that the Women's Caucus, how it's evolved, is that we started off talking about what women make as trial lawyers and how to advocate for yourself. And so this group offered and has offered a lot of women in NCAJ transparency. And I think that's really, really huge.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Lauren, one thing that your friends know about you, but maybe not everyone knows, is that you have sort of an alter ego as an Instagram influencer. Tell me about how your at My Modern Tutor account came to be. Talk to me a little bit about how the social media landscape is right now with changes going on. You know, Meta is and TikTok, there's a lot of uncertainty. How are you navigating these changes, and are they having any effect on you, and you have any advice for others? It's kind of a strange place we're in.
Yeah, social media as I don't know, I came up in the generation when you still had to have a .edu account to get on Facebook. So um, I feel like I've kind of learned as I've gone along, and I still haven't gotten on TikTok, but that's another story. It scares me.
Me too.
But Instagram, I had a regular account for my kids, and then I had an account for my business. And then I decided during the pandemic or right before, when I was building a house, that I was going to document all these crazy decisions I was making and all these DIY projects that I was doing. And then finally, a friend of mine who is an actual influencer. I'm not. So anyone who calls me that, I just share things that I like, and it doesn't even pay the cost of maintaining the very, very small website that I call a blog. But a friend of mine said, you know what, I really appreciate the thing that you have to say. I'd like for you to get on this platform with me of Like to Know It and share things. And for me, it also started as a mom because I would be up in the middle of the night nursing a child. And I would say,
Right.
oh my goodness, I need something to wear that is functional as a mom who needs to, let's say, nurse a child in a trial. And there was no space for that. So it really started as that, and being able to click on something and buy it and have something sent to your inbox if you liked something, and watching someone try it on. So it really started as that, and then it evolved into just sharing things that I like. And another really good friend of mine within NCAJ, Helen Bedore, has a running blog. So
Right.
she taught me how really easy it was to start a blog. And if I was going to retile my bathroom during COVID because I was bored, or decide to tile an entire laundry room, then I should write about it and take pictures and show people that just because you have blonde hair and you're a trial lawyer, you can also use power tools. So it just kind of evolved, and it's my outlet because what we do is really heavy work a lot of days.
Right.
And when I go home, I want to do something that is the exact opposite of that. And so sometimes that is just deciding to rip down a wall in a house and build something new. Drives my husband crazy.
I was just wondering what your husband's hobbies are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's trying to contain the chaos, I think, of if I say, "Hey, I want to just demolish our entire laundry room and start over and tile it myself." Okay.
That's so funny. So, are you still actively posting? Has anything, like obviously you're in a very different space than I don't know where most of the sort of chaos is going on other people's feeds, but has any of this sort of disruption that's occurred in the last, I don't know, couple of weeks or had any effect on the way that you're living your social media life?
No, other than I'm just watching all the drama. And I think it's really, really kind of interesting to see a lot of influencers and people in the media who have kind of created this, niche part of the economy with selling products on TikTok and Instagram. But it's odd because this TikTok ban has been in the works for a very long time, since the Trump administration. And obviously, when Congress passed the PAFACA, the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, in April of last year, TikTok knew this was coming down the pipeline, and the TikTok marketplace wasn't as huge as it was a month ago at that time. But
Right.
when it was signed into law by President Biden in April of 2024, that was a very bipartisan thing. And it was largely because TikTok was linked to ByteDance, which it has nothing to do with TikTok itself, but ByteDance is the Chinese owned company that it's linked to that they use for their algorithm, which is responsible for what you see. So if I'm like me and I want to see, okay, tile in a bathroom, for example, and you type that in, that's why you're going to see a lot of tile for bathroom show up on your ads and within your social media feed. But that algorithm through ByteDance, that Chinese owned company that was tracking everyone, and is one of the reasons why I never got on TikTok, because it did concern me so much. I mean, I'm a pretty boring person. I don't think anybody's going to get anything from following me around, but it does concern me on a larger scale that this foreign corporation is spying on millions of people and tracking their data and habits and things of that nature. So I do think our government was wise to get in front of it. And, TikTok knew this was coming down the pipeline for a long time. So they waited to sue for a while. And when they did so on First Amendment grounds. And the DC Circuit said no. And the Supreme Court had until January 19th to intervene to stop it. And they said, no, we're not going to stop it because it doesn't interfere with your First Amendment rights. Because we're not saying TikTok can't exist in America. We're just saying you have to divest from ByteDance, this algorithm that's collecting all of this data. And so TikTok refused to divest of it. And when they did, that's when TikTok went dark for a couple days. And, then the president signed an executive order to kind of let it stay alive for 75 days by instructing the attorney general not to do anything. So while a lot of people have gotten back on TikTok, a lot of people have not. And I think I read a day or two ago that the hopes from the current administration is that someone like Facebook, Meta, Google, someone comes in and buys TikTok, or that potentially the US government could be a 50% partner in TikTok. So we'll see. But all I know is my kids aren't getting on TikTok anytime soon.
Well, I have to say, it has definitely helped invigorate interest in politics in my 17, soon to be 18-year-old, because he wasn't old enough to vote in this fall's election, but he was engaged, but more as sort of it was more of a spectator sport. Things got very real around the time of the TikTok ban. I mean, it was the first sort of time that politics entered into his life. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
this is why we're going to vote, right?
Well, but also, lawyers use TikTok, lawyers use Instagram, and I think more are doing it. People are doing it more than ever before, but I think there's a way to do it. I've never done it in a way to market myself from a legal perspective that's anything other than me being authentically me. I think a lot of people use it for their law firm and don't and spend a lot of money and don't like gain a lot of traction by what they're spending because they're not being authentically themselves. So I had a juror tell me recently after a trial that they appreciated that I just had a normal Instagram feed of a normal human and that I did normal human everyday things. And I think that that's part of it is you just have to show up authentically as yourself.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. NCAJ, and I manage the NCAJ social accounts, and the thing that our members, our followers, and we certainly don't have a huge number, but what they want to see is pictures of our real members interacting in real time with each other, doing real things. That's
Yeah.
when people tune in and click and share. So in addition to all the service that you provide in CAJ, you also serve as a delegate to AAJ. What's the work that you do there, and what kind of perspective do you have on the national, I guess, legal profession or the national landscape in sort of this time of upheaval? Any message from the AAJ or any words of wisdom?
Yeah, so I think I was more active in AAJ before I became super involved in NCAJ. I was a member, but I wasn't as involved in NCAJ as soon as I was AAJ. I first served as the revitalization governor for North Carolina for 10 years
Oh, wow.
until giving that spot up last year. That just means you're under 40. So once I turned 40, I took my former boss and mentor's spot as one of our delegates to the AAJ Board of Governors. And our role is we have responsibilities. We have responsibilities for growing membership, for fundraising for pro civil justice candidates. And that's a big thing about AAJ is that it's very pro civil justice. And so the AAJ PAC and the work that AAJ does through their lobbying efforts, et cetera, are just so wonderful in making sure that we have pro civil justice judges and we're able to educate our lawmakers in Congress on civil justice issues. For example, the Women's Caucus every other year does a lobby day. And for a couple years, we did ending forced arbitration. And so it was, we laid the groundwork, 4 or 6 years ago for ending forced arbitration in employment contexts and in sexual assault cases, sexual harassment cases. There are a lot of, any app you have on your phone, there is an arbitration agreement. You click, yes, I accept. Most people don't realize Starbucks, Uber, whatever it is, there is a mandatory arbitration agreement. And so that's called forced arbitration. And so a lot of members of Congress maybe didn't know that when they were putting their loved one or their spouse in an Uber, that if they were sexually assaulted or if something happened, there was a forced arbitration agreement. And that's not fair. That's blocking access to the court. And so that's one thing that AAJ has been hugely involved in. And in the work that I do in the sexual assault space, that was really important to me. So for 2 years, I went up and flew myself up to DC, walked around the halls of Congress, and educated members about what forced arbitration was and just talked to them like normal humans about what's going on. So AAJ does excellent work in that space. And in my opinion, that's one of the biggest things. And that's why, even if you don't practice maybe in federal courts, AAJ has been integral to protecting our clients, protecting access to the courts, and also educating our lawmakers on these things that they're asked to vote on when they might not be lawyers. But also, it's great networking. And for me, it's been invaluable, and headed there next week to Miami.
Great. Well, we'll miss you at the deposition CLE, but we hope you have a great time at AAJ. And thank you for all the work that you've done to help put the CLEs together this year and over the many years you've been involved. And thanks for being on the pod today.
Thanks for having me, Amber.
If anybody needs more information about the CLEs upcoming, you can go to ncaj.com/events. You can see the entire schedule for February. We are loaded with CLEs, including the upcoming depositions CLE on February 14th, the disbursements CLE on February 21st, and the upcoming Women's Caucus retreat on March 13 and 14 in Cary. Again, thanks for being on the podcast, Lauren, and thanks everybody for listening.